Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Team Hurlburt and all those who serve, thank you for attending this year's POW MIA recognition ceremony. Today's ceremony is hosted by the 1st Special Operations Wing Commander in Hurlburt Field Focus 5-6. Please remain standing for the presentation of colors, playing the national anthem, and the invocation.
Aldrich, Taves, Pop! Present the colors.
Color. Hit. Huh. Right shoulder. Huh.
Present, Pop!
Forward. Huh. Mark. Top. That's about. Huh. Huh. Halt! Present! Huh! Right shoulder! Huh! Part time! Huh! Forward! Huh!
Order, Pop! Parade, test!
Let's pray. Almighty God, author of liberty, as we stand united in a common purpose and cause, we pause on this day to remember that there are missing members among our ranks. Brothers and sisters in arms who have been captured and taken as prisoners of war and those missing in action. May the empty places at our POW MIA table make us ever mindful of the debt we owe them and their families. For freedom is never free, and so we honor the incredible sacrifices of these brave men and women who have tasted a cup of suffering even more bitter than death itself. They have been tortured, malnourished, and mistreated. Our hearts rage within us when we think of the injustices that they have faced. And so it is with righteous indignation we say they will never be forgotten. Our resolve to bring every American home shall not waver, but we remain true to our pledge to never leave a soldier, sailor, or airman behind. President Calvin Coolidge said, "The nation that forgets its defenders itself will be forgotten." And so comfort and strengthen the families of those who are still waiting the return of their loved ones. Guard and protect our deployed members who are even now in harm's way. Please return them safely to their families when their mission is complete. And bless this remembrance service. In your holy name, amen.
Please be seated. Thank you, Chaplain Hunziker, and to Team Hurlburt, Honor Guard. I'm Master Sergeant Corey Tash, 1st SOAMXS, your Master of Ceremony for today's honor event. The start of the ceremony marks the end of Hurlburt Field's 24-hour vigil. We are gathered here in a spirit of remembrance for our comrades who were prisoners of war or listed as missing in action. Few of us can imagine the trials and tribulations they endured. We are honored to have in attendance today our guest speaker, Lieutenant General retired Leroy Manor. Mayor Mary Esther, the Honorable Chris Stein. Our host, Vice Wing Commander, 1st Special Operations Wing, Colonel Steve Breeze. Command Chief, 1st Special Operations Wing, Chief Master Sergeant Tony Cruz. Special welcome to all the group and squadron commanders, chiefs, 1st sergeants, veterans, men and women of Team Hurlburt. We would also like to recognize the 1st Special Operations Security Force Squadron. These defenders carried the POW MIA flag during the 24-hour ruck march, strengthening our commitment to never forgetting the importance of this day. Each year, on the 3rd Friday of September, we pause to recognize and remember those members of our armed forces who gave everything of themselves in defense of the independence we hold dear. All military installations fly the National League of Families POW MIA flag as we are flying today. It is a symbol of our nation's concern and commitment to fully resolving as much as possible the fate of Americans still held prisoner, missing or unaccounted for. Please direct your attention to the back of your program for a breakdown of the 965 Americans accounted for since the end of the war in 1965 through today. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have Lieutenant General retired Leroy Manor as our special guest. Allow me to share some of the highlights of his command. Lieutenant General Leroy Manor was the commander of the Air Force Special Operations Force and a Joint Task Force during the 1970s. Their mission, Operation Ivory Coast, was to search and rescue prisoner of wars at Sun Tay, Vietnam. This was the first joint military operations in United States history. He was awarded this Distinguished Service Medal for successful joint operations capability. Ladies and gentlemen, Lieutenant General Leroy Manor.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here. I feel honored to be able to join in remembrance of those who suffered as POWs, primarily in Vietnam, but in all, let's include them all the wars. I want to recognize the marchers, the Ruck Marchers, Colonel Freeze, all members of the Hurlburt wings of the base, distinguished guests, former prisoners of war. Do we have any former prisoners of war with us this morning? Whether they're here or not, we think of them, we never forget them, and their families. Because we gather here today to recall, as we have done many past occasions, to recall the plight of fellow Americans and have hopes for those who have not yet been accounted for, that will happen soon. We hope that for their families as well as for them. Primarily, I will talk about those who became prisoners of war during the period of 1964 and 1973. I will refer to some special dates. Stay with me. The time will not permit that we go into details, but I think that we can take a look at, think about the things that happened over those years. And I selected 1964 because it was on August the 5th of 1964 that we lost one of our people became a prisoner of war. He became a prisoner of war on that day. Vietnam, it was the first strike that we made in Vietnam. We, with the U.S. Air Force, U.S. Navy, the Marines, and the Vietnamese forces, made a strike against targets in North Vietnam. It was in retaliation, and the retaliation was a decision that was made by our President and Secretary of Defense, President Johnson, Mr. McNamara, who was our Secretary of Defense, in retaliation for the allegation that the North Vietnamese had, from a gunboat, fired on one of our destroyers in international waters in the Tonkin Gulf. On that date, we lost an airplane, a Navy airplane. And Everett Alvarez was the pilot of that airplane, and he became a POW. It's important to remember that name because he was there as a POW until February of 1973. 9 years. The first Air Force loss that we had was not long after that. On the 2nd of March, an Air Force pilot by the name of Hayden Lockhart became a prisoner of war. So he was there for a long time. He also, you might say, came home during the month of February of 1973. Following that year, there were many more strikes made against North Vietnam. And now we might fast forward to 1970. 1970, 6 years since we lost Everett Alvarez. The POW situation had changed somewhat. There were 515, we had the names of 515 Americans that were being held by North Vietnam. 333 were U.S. Air Force, 145 were Navy, 37 were Marines. Again, I'll refer to Everett Alvarez. He'd already been there for 6 years, suffering the torture that was handed out to all of our POWs in North Vietnam. When this started, I was in the Pentagon working on matters that dealt with Vietnam, but in those 6 years, my assignment was changed. It included a 1-year assignment as a wing commander of a fighter wing in Vietnam, the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing. We had 5 squadrons in that wing. One squadron was the Misty Squadron. The Misty Squadron was using 100s to do missions in North Vietnam, and it was very risky missions. Some of you, maybe all of you, will remember Colonel Day, Bud Day. He was a Misty pilot, and he became a POW, as a matter of fact, for his devotion to our country. He was granted a top decoration in our country. At that period, and the reason that I selected 1970 as a period, there was a great deal of concern regarding our POWs. There was growing concern throughout the country, and certainly throughout the military, and certainly among those of us who had known so many of the people who were now being held in North Vietnam. We were concerned with the morale of our POWs. Some had been held there for so long, and they had no idea of what their country was doing for them. What were we doing? Well, there wasn't a whole lot we could do except we were negotiating with the North Vietnamese for some kind of an arrangement where the POWs could come home. And that, of course, was not working out. And to try to work a deal with the communists was, and probably still is, the next to impossible thing to do. So there was great concern, not only among the military, but among the civilians. And this is another time when I became involved. At this time, I was commander of the Special Operations Force at Eglin. Hurlburt was really the primary base of Special Operations, even at that time, but my office was at Eglin. I was called for a meeting with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, along with an Army colonel. To meet with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Moore, and it was a very meaningful meeting. He said, because of the great concern that we have for our Americans who are being held in North Vietnam, we want to do something for them. We want them to know that we have not forgotten them. What followed would probably have been listed by some people as a failure. I don't include it as a failure because we did get a message to the POWs that we had not forgotten them. And that in itself was a morale raiser for those people. Admiral Moore said, we have reason to believe that we could do a raid at one of the smaller camps, the smaller prisons in North Vietnam, and might even be possible to bring some of them home. But at any rate, we'll be able to show to the POWs, because word will spread out through all the POW camps that a raid was conducted, and it will help the morale. So if you accomplish that, we've accomplished, that's enough reason really to go. But let's bring some back if we can. Colonel Simon was the Army colonel who had been called there along with me. And the chairman asked us if we would be willing to put together a force that would be able to do that, to do a raid against a prison in North Vietnam. He didn't say that we had to do it. He asked us if we would give it some consideration. Immediately our answer was yes. We were honored to be asked to do this. We would very much like to do something like this that would help our POWs. So he appointed me as the commander, and Will Simons as the deputy commander to put this together. Now, one important item here is that he did not tell us how to do it. He said, come back and tell us being the Joint Chiefs of Staff, if it can be done, and if you can do it, when would you be ready to do it? Any of the resources that we have in any of the services are yours to take from in putting this force together. I thought I was dreaming. I couldn't believe such an assignment, but I was very pleased to get it. And immediately we started to, we left it. That was about the extent of our meeting. Some studying had been done already on the various places that might be available to go to. And there was a colonel who worked for the chairman. His name was Blackburn, Don Blackburn. And he had a group that had studied that, and we were able to benefit a great deal from what they had done. But we expanded the planning group. We stationed it in the Pentagon, a secure place in the Pentagon, so that they would be close to the intelligence sources in the Washington area. And then we turned our attention to what will this force look like? What kind of a force are we going to put together? Number one, we decided they would all be volunteers. Number two, it would include more than one service. It would be the Air Force and the Army. But it's not going to be an Army operation, not going to be an Air Force operation. It's going to be a joint operation. So we put together a joint task force. We moved that here to the Eglin area, and this is where we did our training at Eglin. The air part of it was to provide the transportation to go from a base in Thailand to the objective area just outside, 20 miles from the center of Hanoi. The force that we put together included 6 helicopters, 2 combat Talon C-130s, 5 A-1s, and we added to that, but these were the primary forces that we put together and trained with here at Eglin. Simons and I spent a good part of our time with the planning group in Washington, and part of our time monitoring the training that was going on here at Eglin. And as I said before, we don't have time here this morning to go through some of the details, but we got what we wanted. We got what we asked for as far as support was concerned. And we had to do this in a very secure manner, because security was one of the primary factors. One of the things that bothered me as the commander of this unit was, what if the enemy learns that we are planning to do this? And then they would have a party waiting for us to come, and that could have been very hazardous. We wanted to avoid that. And we did everything that we know how did know how to do to avoid that. And in a like manner, we had difficulty getting all the intelligence that we needed or wanted in order to do this. And for example, we had picked Sante as a camp that we would go to. Would we be sure that the POW was there? We had the names of 60 or so that were there. At least we had indications that they were there. But they made changes just like we made changes in our military. And the most recent information that we had was about 4 months old. The training went well at Duke, north of here. The planning went well in Washington. And as instructed by the chairman, when he said, come back and tell us whether or not you can do it, and if so, if you can, when. So we made arrangements. Arrangements were made for us by General Blackburn to brief the Joint Chiefs of Staff our decision. And we did this on the 16th of September. Today is the 16th of September. So it was a day like today. We briefed the chiefs. We said, it is feasible. It is feasible to do this. And we explained how we would do it. And also pointed out the hazard part, what could happen. It could be a very costly mission. But should we meet a welcoming party when we get there, even though our losses obviously would be heavy, the Vietnam losses would be very heavy also. Every man that we took up there was a volunteer. He's very experienced in military operations. They all had experience in Vietnam, and they were fighters. The pilots who flew the helicopters, C-130s, and the A-1s, who were part of this force, were also veterans of Vietnam. They also were volunteers to do this. One helicopter, the HH-3 that would land inside the prison, was going to be lost. We decided that we will lose it, we will destroy it before we leave there. And there were many good reasons, I thought, to do that. We briefed the chiefs that we would do that, and there was no objection. We only got some objections later from the squadron commander that we had borrowed it from. The chairman of the Chief of Staff said, after he talked with his members of his group, that we approve the plan that you have, and they made no changes in the plan that we had. But he said, we don't have the authority to give you the final approval. Next, you need to talk with the Secretary of Defense, who was Mr. Mel Laird. And we did this on the 24th of September. Now, you would have thought that you'll do that the next day. This is pretty important. Well, there was a war going on. There was a lot of things important on the Secretary of Defense's desk. Anyway, we got an audience on the 24th. He listened, as the members of the Joint Chiefs did, and at the end he said, I like it. I approve it. But he says, I haven't got the final authority to give you. Well, it was some time before we were able to get to a higher authority. And, I might say that what we were shooting for was to do this in October. Well, it was, I think it was the October the 9th that we were able to go to the White House and brief. And we briefed Mr. Kissinger, who was the military advisor, I'll call it, to the president and General, I don't know, his name slips me. Anyway, he has a major general who was his right-hand man. Said, we like your plan. We have some questions. They asked the questions. We were able to answer those in a way to convince them that, look, we've looked at that. We can take care of that. So they said, Mr. Kissinger said, how soon do you need a decision on this, and to make your October deadline or the October target for doing the mission? I said I need it by tomorrow night. Now what we had to do is take that force that we had trained here, move it to a base in Thailand. We were launching out of a base in northern Thailand to go to Hanoi. And he said, I won't be able to give you a decision by that time. The president is not available. Well, what was magic about 24 or 25 of October? No, 20 October. 21 October was our date. The problem, you probably wouldn't believe, was what the moon was doing. We didn't want a completely black night because we're going to operate there in their area, really. At night, we're going to be there at 2:30 in the morning. It's going to be real dark. We need some moon. So we decided that what we needed was 35 degrees above the horizon with the moon, and 1/4 or 1/4 moon. The almanacs would tell us that we would have that on the 25th to the 28th October, and the same thing would happen again in November. So we said, okay, fine, the 20th of October, that's our date. That's our date to go. And so that's why the question, how soon must you get a decision in order to be able to make that date? I said, I've got to have it by tomorrow night. Can't do it. I never did get a good reason why I couldn't get to the president before then, but I do know that there were negotiations going on, and which, as I mentioned earlier, they went on quite often in Paris between North Vietnam and our representatives. And so maybe it was to delay that, or maybe there were other reasons. Anyway, he said, Kissinger said, I feel confident that you'll get an approval to go in November. And so that's the best that we could come up with. The worst part of that was that it's another month for the North Vietnamese to learn that we are doing something like this, and that would be much to our disaster. However, we had no choice. So we continued with gathering information. You will say, well, but you didn't gather enough. Didn't learn that they weren't there. No, we didn't. But we did other things that made that very helpful. Our conduct of the raid itself. In our policy during the raid, we measure time over target in seconds, not minutes, in seconds. It's got to be very carefully done so that we do exactly as we have planned. And as I said, we benefited. I won't go over some of the things that we were able to include in our planning, but we did get the approval to go in November. Our November date being the 21st rather of November. In the meantime, we briefed Admiral McCain, who was the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Command. He had a son whose name was John. You all know John. John was a POW. So my thought was, when we briefed McCain, Admiral McCain, will he be concerned that our going there and doing this will aggravate the North Vietnamese to the point where they will take it out on the POWs? We didn't think so, but we knew that was a possibility. And how will Admiral McCain take it? Well, apparently it didn't bother him that much. He supported it. And we went to Saigon, briefed the theater commander, Saigon, and I had some concern about his accepting what we were doing, because here we're bringing a force from the United States to this area where he's the theater commander, and he doesn't even know that this is being planned. It was news to him. I said he might not accept that. However, when we went there in the name of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the Secretary of Defense. So the briefing took about an hour. I said, "Sir, this is what we plan to do and when we plan to do it. Do you have any questions?" So now the phone's going on. He said, "Yes, I have one question. When you're here doing this, who are you working for?" I said, "I'll be working for the Secretary of Defense and for the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and has the President's approval." Well, he says, "It's got my approval also. And anything that you need that I have control over is available to you." Turned to the Air Force commander, whom I knew. I had not known the Army General before. And he indicated his approval also. And this was important because we needed to use some of the facilities. Well, I've got to move on here. Okay, I'm going to have to speed up just a little bit. We moved, we came back home. After going to the aircraft carrier, the Oriskany, talked to the Navy commander and tell him that we would like to have, and we asked him actually, if he would would fly a mission that night against the coast of North Vietnam because we're going to come in from the east. If he's doing this we're going to come in from the west. He's going to come in from the east and cover us as far as the attentions of their air defense system. He said, "I will." Okay, we came back and moved our force. I went personally to the headquarters of the Airlift Command, made arrangements for some C-141s to move the force, and we moved them to Tak Ly, Thailand. There we had a couple of days to get ready before we had actually launched. We needed good weather. We had to air refuel our helicopters, air refuel the fighters that I had mentioned before, that would provide some coverage for us. The weather was going to be bad. There was a typhoon moving and toward us, and it would cover that area the night that we planned to go. That didn't sound good. It was, however, good for the day before. And after weighing all the factors, I made the decision to go 24 hours earlier. And did not inform, rather, I did not seek permission from the Washington level to do that. I had already received the order to go, but not on the regular planned date of 20. But I informed them. So we went in, and it all went well. Movement went well. To the prisoner of war camp, and they landed inside the prison, landed outside the prison. Several books that have been written about this. When you read that, there will be some ideas in the books that you'll read, give you a little more. I won't agree with everything that I'm saying right now, as far as landing at the site. But things went well. We did what we needed to do. The first part of it was there were no POWs. We neutralized the place, pretty well destroyed it, and came back, and we had no losses. We had 2 injuries, not severe injuries, no losses. We lost the helicopter that we planned to leave there. We lost the 105 Wild Weasel, which was there to protect us against sites, the missiles. It was hit by a missile, lost fuel. They had to bail out. 2 people in that airplane. Helicopter from our force found them, picked them up, brought them to Udon, Thailand. They were there about the same time we were. So it all really worked well. Simons and I were directed to come home to Washington as soon as possible. A lot of questions were being asked, such as, and they wanted us to help answer those questions. They said, the North Vietnamese said we had bombed a POW camp, which wasn't true. We had not bombed one. We pretty well destroyed one, but we hadn't bombed it. Anyway, we stopped in Honolulu on the way home, met Admiral McCain. As a matter of fact, he had arranged that. He canceled our Pan American flight to Washington, and scheduled one of his 135s to take us the rest of the way. But he wanted to talk with us, and I'll never forget one of the things that he said as we were leaving. He says, "Don't let anybody tell you that this mission was a failure, because the POWs didn't come out. Because the word of having done this will spread to all the POWs, all 535 or whatever it was, and that will be good for their morale, and it will be telling them a little bit that we are concerned. America is concerned for their people." Okay. How about the POWs learned within a day or so? I wish there were POWs here, they could tell you. But many POWs have told me that this helped them a lot, because the North Vietnamese had to close all their small camps. They didn't know when we might do this again. They brought them all to the 2 main prisons, Saigon, and not Saigon, in Hanoi, and they were able to live communally. They weren't in solitary confinement so much. So it helped them in lots of ways. The food improved a little. Okay. Well, to bring this to a close, it didn't come out until February, March, and April of '73. At that time, I was at Clark Air Base. They all came through Clark Air Base in the Philippines. I was real anxious to talk to them, particularly those who had been at Son Tay, and ask the question, when did you leave Son Tay? Because a lot of people were saying, oh, we knew you were coming, so they moved them. I said, if they had known we were coming, they would have done more than move the POWs. So, the word that I got, they moved them in the middle of May. We didn't get the assignment to do this till the 8th of August. So, and then I did those people who said, anyway, they came out, 591 came out in January, rather in February, March, and April. I had to meet most of them, talk to them, find out about it a lot. We thought there should have been more than that. And I don't know if it's possible that there are more still there. It's possible. Some of them would probably be about my age, which is 95. Anyway, anyway, that's all the time we have for this. And let me close by saying, Hoffman in the words on the 8th of May of 1945. I was in Nuremberg, Germany. May the 8th of 1945 is listed in our history. It was, when I was there, was the war is over. War is over. There was celebration. We were proud to have been part of that because we had helped to free Europe from the Hitler efforts to not have it a free continent. Where would he have moved next if we had not? On the 15th of August, I was in London. That was the day that the war ended in the Pacific. And there was a lot of celebration. Dancing throughout the night in the streets. Again, I was proud to be an American, as I am today. However, on the last day of April of 1975, when we were hustling to bring the few remaining people out of Vietnam to Clark Air Base on the way home to the United States, we even had to use the helicopters on top of the embassy to bring the ambassador out of Saigon. I couldn't be as proud then. I just felt badly. Felt badly that it had turned the way that it did. You know, on the Vietnam Memorial today, we have 58,000 plus gone up from the names. Americans that really did, our military people did a great job. And I can tell you that experience. I spent a lot of time. I spent 12 years of my career, plus one of those 12 years, flying fighters in Vietnam. I can tell you that the people that I dealt with did a great job. I may not always have agreed with some of the decisions that were made, but then I didn't have a position for controlled decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have the opportunity to stand here at this microphone. I hope I have not disrupted. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant General. Colonel Brees, please join Lieutenant General Manner to lay the memorial POW MIA wreath. This wreath is laid in memory of those who perished while in captivity. They paid the ultimate sacrifice for our liberty. Thank you, Lieutenant General Manner. Ladies and gentlemen, first Special Operations Vice Wing Commander, Colonel Breeze.
You know, General Manner, that part of the story where you talked about how long it took you to brief it up the chain of command, the bureaucracy that you had to go through, well, I'm sorry to say it still exists today. And sometimes it's even longer. Thank you, Mayor Stein, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the Focus 5-6 group for putting this together. Yes. This is an awesome ceremony. Thanks for putting the time in and the effort. It's absolutely perfect today. And for everyone here today, thank you for sharing in this remembrance ceremony. Your commitment, past, present, and future, is what keeps our freedoms alive today in our country. Thank you so much for coming here today. A special thank you for General Manner. We are absolutely honored and privileged to have you here today to tell your story. It's an extremely important story to the ethos of our Air Commandos today. And real quickly, like I mentioned to you right before the ceremony, that's one of the first stories I heard when I entered Special Ops back in 1995, was from an instructor at Kirtland Air Force Base, was telling me the story about the Sante raid. And boy, it motivated me to no end. And I'll never forget what you guys did there and the Holloway Commission that you were a party of and how you began the foundation of where we are today. Thank you, sir, very much. One last thing, dawning statistic. 83,666 missing Americans we have today as of mid-September. We shall never forget.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, to further honor and remember those sacrifices of those who are prisoners of war as well as those who are missing in action and their family members, please stand. Please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Honor Guard raising the POW MIA flag and the playing of taps. Colonel Breeze will lead the military members and present and order arms as the flag is lowered. Our civilian guests are invited to place their hands over their heart.
Wing, stand, hut. Present. Present. Arms.
Please be seated. To all the former prisoners of war and surviving spouses, this program is only a small token of the heartfelt appreciation we feel for the tremendous sacrifices you have made and continue to make in the defense of this great country. We will never forget. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our ceremony. Please take a moment to greet our honored guests before you leave. Thank you for joining us today.